Hi everybody, welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you the lime marinade recipe. I'm going to be using it on country pork spare ribs and a fillet of salmon. Start out with some limes, some fresh garlic, add some Dijon mustard, lots of spices, and some olive oil. Now I brought the apple cider vinegar out just in case we don't have enough lime juice. Sometimes the limes are not as juicy as we want them to be. So we're going to start out with peeling the garlic. Get the cutting board out. If you don't want to use as much garlic, you can take some out. I just happen to like a lot of the garlic flavor. Go ahead and peel the skin off. Sometimes if you have a hard time getting the skin off, if you just give it a little push on the counter with your hand, it'll come off a lot easier. Nope, that one almost got away. There we go. And I decided to mince the garlic with my knife today. You could use the rasp or a small grater if you wanted to. I just decided to use the knife. And I do like to keep the pieces a little bit bigger. Just a preference. Please be careful with the knife. Next is going to be the limes. Now, because we're going to zest the limes, I am going to wash them off. Give them a good wash and dry them off. You just want to remember when you're using the rasp to watch your fingers. It is very sharp. I have slipped a couple of times. So we just want the green part. That's where the oil is and that's where all the flavor is. You want to make sure that you're turning the lime as you're running it down the rasp. And that'll help just get the green. Take your time. There's no big rush. Remember, we're supposed to be having fun. And we'll scoop that up and get that in with the garlic. And I think one is going to be enough. So we'll cut our limes in half. I went ahead and cut all three you can always use a piece of lime for something. So just so it's ready if we need it. Go ahead and give it a good squeeze. I love the sound that the juice makes as it's dropping into the bowl. Try to get as much as you can out of each piece. Limes are not always the juiciest, but these limes were particularly good ones. You want about 1/3 of a cup of lime juice. And we're just going to use those 2 instead of all 3. And next, we're going to use the Dijon mustard. Now, if I was paying attention, I would have put the juice in the jar and shaken the jar really good so I could get it all out easy, but I didn't. So, next time. But you only need 1.5 tablespoons, so. And don't be afraid to get your hands in there and scrape it out with your fingers. And then we're going to put the salt and pepper in. It's 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. We'll start with our spices. That is ground oregano, and that is sage. And it's 1/2 teaspoon of each one. And next is the chili powder, which is 2 teaspoons. And then the coriander, which is 1.5 teaspoons. And the cumin, 1/2 teaspoon. And the smoked paprika, which is 1 full teaspoon. And I'm going to whisk that up real good. And if you'll notice, it's very liquidy. And what's going to happen is when you get the olive oil in there and you start whisking it around, it's going to get thicker. It does something called emulsifying, and that's what that means. It gets thicker, just like it does when you make a salad dressing. Get that last little bit in there. And that was 1/2 cup of olive oil. Okay, we're going to use this on pork country ribs. They're a thicker cut of meat. They do have a fair amount of fat on there, but they are very good, and especially when you use them on the grill. So I picked a glass dish to marinate this in. Get them out of the package. And trim some of the fat off. And this is where a sharp knife comes in handy. I definitely have to sharpen my knives. This was a little bit of a struggle. The rest of the ribs were pretty good. They didn't have too much fat on them. You don't want to take it all off because there is a lot of flavor in that. And especially since we're going to do them on the grill, it will just drip off. So the next thing we want to do is salt and pepper both sides. And this is why I use the salt and pepper shakers, because it makes it a lot easier just to make sure that everything gets evenly coated. And you flip them over and do the other side. You want to make sure that you do get them evenly coated because this is where a lot of their flavor is going to come from. The salt in the marinade was just for the marinade. It wasn't to salt and pepper the meat. And we're going to use about 3/4 of this. And they don't have to be submerged. Roll them around in it a little bit. Make sure that as much of it is covered that you can get. And I did decide to cover them with some aluminum foil. You can use whatever you want. If you want to use plastic wrap instead, that's fine. But I just chose to use the foil this time. If you have a container that has a lid, you could do that too. Whatever you prefer. But they'll get covered and get put in the fridge for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. And now we're going to put the rest of the marinade on the fish, which I did a little closer to the time that I was going to start the grill and do the cooking. The fish doesn't take as long. I like to do the fish for about 30 minutes. Sometimes the fish can get mushy if you leave it on there for too long. What happens is the acid, which is the lime juice, starts to actually cook the fish and it breaks it down. Now I'm going to take the plastic wrap off. And I'm going to marinate it right in the container. We just get all the plastic wrap off. You want to make sure that you get that plastic pad that's underneath the meat. Get that out of there too. And there is a piece of skin on this fish, so I didn't worry about putting anything on the bottom because I don't eat the skin. So I just made sure that it was evenly coated. Give it a little swirl. And then we're going to get the grill going. We've got the grill on. Everything got on there. And you want your temperature to be around 350, 375. Just like you would if you were cooking it in your oven. And this has been on here for about maybe 6 or 7 minutes at this point. And I'm going to turn the fish around because I want the thicker side to be closer to the heat. I'll let them cook for a little bit longer. And we're going to give it a check. Give the ribs a little bit of a turn. Now the salmon will be cooked at your preference. I prefer my salmon to be cooked a little bit more. And you can test it by just pushing on it. If it's very soft and squishy, it needs to cook more for me. It means that the inside is not cooked completely. So I like mine done all the way. And then we're going to turn the ribs over. They've been on there for about 8 to 10 minutes on one side. And the fish is done. Now it will cook just a little bit more once you take it off. So take it off just before you think it's done. Tray out of the way. Those trays are great for any kind of fish or shrimp or anything you don't want to fall through the grill. And we'll get that inside. And we'll check our ribs again. And the best way to check your meat is a meat thermometer. There's all little tricks that you can do and push on the meat, and if it resists and feels like a certain part of your hand, I still think the best way is to use a thermometer. Pork should be cooked to 145 degrees. And that way you know you're safe. And once it reaches, even if it's 143, that's fine, because just like the fish, once you take it off the heat, it will keep cooking a little bit. It may raise 3 or 4 degrees more. So we're going to take that off and get it onto a plate. This marinade would also be great on chicken, and you could use it on some shrimp, and you could even use it on some steak. If you want to use it on steak, then I would let it marinate a little bit longer, maybe closer to 3 or 4 hours. Beef is a little bit denser, so it will take a little bit longer to marinate. Turn the grill off, which I always try to do right after I'm done using it so it never gets left on. And we'll get these in the house. And I hope you enjoyed this recipe, and I hope you give it a try. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching, and see you next recipe.